The coffee dripped onto Danny Baker's shoes before she could step back from the counter, the scalding liquid seeping through the fabric of her flats as the angry customer continued his tirade. "Are you stupid? I said no cream." The red-faced man slammed his fist on the counter, causing the remaining coffee in the cup to slosh over the sides. "This is the second time. Do you even speak English?" Danny took a deep breath, willing her voice not to shake. "I'm very sorry, sir. I'll remake it right away. Don't bother." "Your incompetence has made me late." The man's voice escalated, drawing the attention of everyone in the busy Manhattan cafe. "I want to speak to your manager. People like you shouldn't be serving coffee if you can't get a simple order right." 6 months into her barista job at Brew Haven, Danny had encountered difficult customers before, but none who had reduced her to the verge of tears quite like this man. She desperately needed this job to cover rent while she finished her final semester of college. Her hands trembled as she reached for a napkin to clean up the spill. "Excuse me." A deep voice cut through the commotion, and the cafe fell silent. Danny looked up to see a tall man in an impeccably tailored navy suit stepping forward from the line. His presence commanded attention without effort, but it was his intense gaze that momentarily stunned her. "I believe I was standing behind you when you ordered," the man said to the irate customer, his voice calm but authoritative. "The young lady made exactly what you asked for, a medium dark roast with light cream." The rude customer sputtered. "That's not, I distinctly heard you," the stranger continued, "and throwing coffee at service workers is unacceptable regardless of the circumstance." He turned to Danny. "Are you all right? Did you get burned?" Danny felt her face flush under his concerned gaze. "I'm fine, thank you." The cafe manager appeared, drawn by the commotion. The rude customer tried to launch into his complaint, but the stranger intercepted. "This gentleman owes your employee an apology and compensation for her damaged shoes," he stated firmly. "I witnessed the entire exchange." The manager, recognizing the well-dressed stranger, nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Preston, whatever you say." Danny's eyes widened. "Preston." As in Quentin Preston of Preston Real Estate Development, the billionaire whose face occasionally graced the business section of newspapers. The rude customer, now realizing who had intervened, mumbled an apology and hastily left the cafe. "I'm sorry about your shoes," Quentin Preston said, his eyes warm as they met Danny's. "May I pay for a replacement pair?" "That's really not necessary," Danny replied, feeling self-conscious about her coffee-stained discount store flats. "I insist." He pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. "Call my office. My assistant will arrange it." Before she could respond, Quentin ordered a simple black coffee, left a $100 bill in the tip jar, and with a final glance at Danny, walked out of the cafe. Danny stared at the elegant card in her hand, embossed with Quentin Preston, CEO, Preston Real Estate Development. Her coworker nudged her. "Do you know who that was? He owns half the buildings in this neighborhood, including this one." Danny slipped the card into her pocket, certain she would never actually call. What would someone like Quentin Preston want with someone like her? 3 days later, Danny was still thinking about the encounter as she struggled through her shift with pinched toes. Her coffee-stained flats had been her only pair of work shoes, and she couldn't afford new ones until payday next week. "Danny, there's someone asking for you," her coworker called from the front. When she emerged from the back room, Danny froze. Quentin Preston stood at the counter, looking even more imposing in a charcoal suit that highlighted his broad shoulders. "You didn't call," he said simply. I didn't want to bother you over something so trivial," she replied, keenly aware of her coworker's curious stares. "Damaged property isn't trivial, neither is being treated disrespectfully." His eyes dropped to her feet. "You're still wearing the same shoes." Danny shifted uncomfortably. "They're fine, they'll dry eventually." Quentin frowned. "When do you get off work? In an hour. I'll wait." True to his word, when Danny's shift ended, Quentin was sitting at a corner table, laptop open, several files spread before him. He closed everything when she approached. "You really don't need to do this," Danny protested. "Consider it selfish." I can't concentrate knowing I let someone walk away injured from a situation I witnessed. His smile was disarming. I'm Quentin Preston, by the way, properly introduced this time, Danny Baker. Well, Danny Baker, there's a department store 2 blocks from here. I'd like to replace your shoes, and perhaps you'll join me for dinner afterward. I missed lunch dealing with contractors. Something about his straightforward manner made it difficult to refuse. An hour later, Danny found herself wearing new leather flats that cost more than her weekly salary, sitting across from Quentin at an upscale restaurant where the maitre d' had greeted him by name. "Tell me about yourself," Quentin said after they'd ordered. "There's not much to tell." "I'm finishing my degree in environmental science. Working at the cafe to make ends meet. Environmental science, that's fascinating. Any particular focus?" Danny hesitated, unused to anyone showing genuine interest in her studies. "Urban sustainability. I'm researching how commercial buildings can reduce their environmental impact." Quentin's eyes lit up. "That's exactly what my newest development project needs. We're aiming for LEED Platinum certification, but hitting roadblocks with the water reclamation system." What Danny had expected to be an awkward, obligatory dinner transformed into an animated discussion about sustainable architecture and urban planning. Quentin listened attentively to her ideas, asked insightful questions, and shared challenges from his projects. "You know, I could use someone with your perspective," he said as they finished dessert. "Would you be interested in consulting for my environmental team? Part-time, of course, until you finish your degree." Danny nearly choked on her water. "Me, but I'm not even graduated yet." "You have practical knowledge many of my consultants lack. They're theorists. You understand real-world applications." He handed her another business card. "Think about it. The pay would be significantly better than the cafe." As they parted ways outside the restaurant, Quentin hesitated. "Would it be presumptuous to ask if I could see you again? Not for business." Danny felt her heart skip. "I'd like that." One dinner led to another, then to gallery openings, Broadway shows, and weekend walks through Central Park. Quentin was nothing like the cold, calculating businessman Danny had imagined. With her, he was thoughtful and genuinely interested in her perspectives. He valued her opinions on his projects and introduced her ideas to his development team. When Danny accepted the consulting position, she insisted on keeping her cafe job until she proved herself. Quentin respected her decision, though he often arrived at the cafe during her shifts, ordering black coffee and working quietly in the corner until she finished. "Don't you have an office with assistants and fancy espresso machines?" she teased one afternoon. "The coffee's better here," he replied with a smile that made her heart flutter. 3 months into their relationship, Quentin invited Danny to the grand opening of his newest building, a mixed-use development, incorporating many of her sustainability suggestions. "This is your victory too," he whispered as they toured the rooftop garden designed to filter rainwater for reuse throughout the building. "Your ideas made this possible." That night, as they celebrated with champagne on the balcony of his penthouse overlooking the city, Quentin grew serious. "When I stepped into that cafe, I just wanted coffee before a meeting. I never expected to find you." He took her hands. "I've built skyscrapers, but nothing compares to what we're building together." Their first kiss beneath the Manhattan skyline felt like coming home. As their relationship deepened, Danny struggled with the imbalance between them. Quentin lived in a world of private jets and charity galas while she counted pennies for textbooks. When he surprised her with expensive gifts, she often felt uncomfortable. "You don't need to buy me things," she told him after he presented her with diamond earrings for her birthday. "I know I don't need to," he replied. "I want to, but if it makes you uncomfortable, I'll stop." True to his word, Quentin adjusted. Instead of lavish presents, he gave thoughtful gifts, rare books on environmental science, a handcrafted birdhouse for her tiny apartment balcony, cooking classes they could take together. He made space for her in his world without trying to change who she was. Danny graduated with honors, and Quentin cheered loudest at the ceremony. Her consulting work had turned into a full-time position heading the environmental division of Preston Development. The day after graduation, he surprised her with keys to a new office. "This isn't just any office," he explained, leading her through the building. "This is the headquarters for the New Preston Environmental Foundation, and I want you to run it." "What, Quentin? I don't know anything about running a foundation." "You know everything about making buildings sustainable, about reducing carbon footprints, about creating green spaces in urban environments. The rest we can figure out together." His eyes were earnest. "This foundation will fund research and implement real solutions. You've always wanted to make a difference, here's your chance." The foundation became Danny's passion. With Quentin's resources and her vision, they funded innovative projects across the city. Old buildings were retrofitted with sustainable technologies. Community gardens sprouted on previously abandoned lots. Schools received grants for environmental education programs. 1 year after their first meeting, Quentin took Danny back to the cafe where it all began. "I bought out the place for the evening," he explained as they entered the empty cafe. "I wanted privacy for this." The cafe had been transformed with soft lighting and flowers. Their usual table by the window was set with fine china and crystal. "This is where I first saw you," Quentin said, taking her hands. "Standing behind that counter, dignified even when faced with cruelty. I thought I was just defending a stranger, but somehow I knew even then that you were special," Danny smiled. "I thought you were crazy, defending a barista you didn't know, not crazy, just instantly captivated." He led her to the table. "This year has been the best of my life. You've changed how I see the world, how I run my business, how I measure success." As they finished dinner, Quentin grew nervous, a rare sight. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Inside wasn't the massive diamond Danny had feared, but a simple emerald ring surrounded by tiny diamonds. "Green for your passion for the environment," he explained. "The setting is made from recycled platinum. The diamonds are ethically sourced." Tears filled Danny's eyes. Even in this moment, he had thought about what would matter to her. "Danny Baker, I never expected that standing up for a barista would lead me to the love of my life. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, "yes." Their wedding was a compromise held at one of Quentin's hotels, but designed with sustainability in mind. Locally grown flowers, farm-to-table catering, and donations to environmental charities in lieu of favors. For their honeymoon, Quentin surprised Danny with a trip to visit groundbreaking sustainable communities around the world. From solar-powered villages in Africa to floating gardens in the Netherlands, they gathered ideas to bring back to their foundation. 2 years into their marriage, the Preston Environmental Foundation had become a leading force in urban sustainability. Danny had spoken at international conferences, and their model was being replicated in cities across the country. But success brought its own challenges. Danny worked long hours, passionate about their mission. Quentin's development company continued to expand. They sometimes went days seeing each other only in passing. The wake-up call came when Danny fainted during a presentation. At the hospital, the doctor delivered unexpected news. "Congratulations, Mrs. Preston. You're pregnant." The pregnancy forced both Danny and Quentin to reevaluate their priorities. They had created successful businesses, but now they were creating a family. Together, they restructured their work, bringing in talented executives to handle day-to-day operations while they focused on strategic direction and preparing for parenthood. Quentin converted one of his office buildings into a model of family-friendly workspace, with on-site childcare, flexible hours, and accommodations for nursing mothers. The Preston companies became case studies in work-life balance. When their daughter Emma was born, Quentin was a devoted father from the first moment. He changed diapers, walked the floor with a colicky baby, and proudly carried her to board meetings in a sling. "My father was absent," he explained to Danny, "always working, building his empire. I don't want Emma to have those memories." As Emma grew, so did their foundation's impact. By her 5th birthday, the Preston Environmental Foundation had helped transform urban planning policies in 12 major cities. On the anniversary of their first meeting each year, Quentin and Danny returned to Brew Haven Cafe. The staff knew to expect them and always reserved their special table. On their 7th anniversary, Quentin had another surprise. He handed Danny an envelope containing the deed to a building. "What's this?" she asked, confused. "The deed to this cafe and the entire building," he explained. "I bought it years ago after that first day, but I've been waiting for the right moment to give it to you." Danny looked around at the cafe that had changed both their lives. "What am I supposed to do with a cafe?" "Whatever you want, but I had an idea." Quentin's eyes sparkled with excitement. "What if we turned it into a training center for sustainable food service? Teaching cafe owners how to reduce waste, conserve water, source locally." The concept perfectly married their beginnings with their mission. Within a year, the Brew Haven Training Institute was teaching cafe owners from around the country how to operate sustainably while remaining profitable. "We've come full circle," Danny remarked as they watched the first class of trainees graduate. "From coffee spilled on my shoes to changing how cafes operate nationwide. And to think if that customer hadn't been rude, we might never have met," Quentin mused. Danny laughed. "I've often wondered what happened to him." "Actually, I know," Quentin grinned. "He applied for a commercial loan from one of my banks last year. I recognized his name on the application." "Did you deny it?" Danny asked, curious. "No. I approved it with the condition that his new business implement our sustainability protocols and provide fair wages to all employees." Quentin shrugged at Danny's surprised look. "People can change. Look at me, I was a developer only concerned with profit margins before I met you." "You were never that bad," Danny protested. "I wasn't terrible, but I wasn't thinking beyond conventional success." He took her hand. "You taught me that real success includes responsibility to the planet and to people." As their 10th anniversary approached, Quentin and Danny faced a new challenge. Emma was starting school, and Danny was pregnant with their second child. The foundation had expanded to international projects, demanding more of their attention. "Maybe we should scale back," Danny suggested one night as they reviewed proposals for new initiatives. "Or maybe we need to think differently," Quentin countered. "What if we created a family sabbatical program? 6 months where we step back completely, travel with Emma, show her the projects we've helped create around the world." The sabbatical transformed their family. 8-year-old Emma blossomed as she learned about different cultures and saw firsthand the impact of environmental initiatives. Their son Thomas was born in a small village in Costa Rica, where they were helping establish a sustainable forestry program. When they returned to New York, they brought fresh perspectives to their work. The Preston companies now operated with a family-first philosophy that attracted talented employees seeking balance. Their foundation created programs specifically designed to engage children in environmental stewardship. On their 15th anniversary, they returned once more to Brew Haven, now a bustling hub for sustainable food service education. The original cafe still operated in one section, maintaining its character while serving as a real-world classroom. As they sat at their usual table, Quentin presented Danny with a leather-bound book. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find photographs, news clippings, and handwritten notes. "Our story," he explained. "From that first day to now, all the projects, all the milestones, all the difference we've made together." Danny flipped through pages documenting buildings transformed, communities revitalized, policies changed. There were family photos mixed with press clippings, Emma's drawings alongside architectural plans. "It's amazing to see it all in one place," she said, overwhelmed by the visual record of their shared journey. "Turn to the last page," Quentin urged. There she found a recent photo of the cafe, now flanked by 2 new buildings. Architectural renderings showed plans for an expanded campus. "The Preston Baker Institute for Urban Sustainability," she read from the blueprint. "Quentin, what is this?" "Our legacy," he explained. "A teaching institute, research center, and incubator for sustainable businesses all in one. The buildings on either side of the cafe are being renovated now." Danny was speechless. The institute represented everything they had worked for: practical education, innovative research, and support for entrepreneurs committed to sustainability. "We're not just creating buildings anymore," Quentin continued. "We're creating the next generation of changemakers." "When did you plan all this?" Danny asked, amazed at the scope of the project. "I've been working on it for years," he admitted, waiting for the right moment. "This anniversary seemed perfect. 15 years since I stood up for a barista and found my purpose." That night, as they walked hand in hand from the cafe, they passed the spot where they had first parted ways after their impromptu dinner 15 years earlier. "Did you ever imagine that first day that we'd end up here?" Danny asked. "Never," Quentin admitted. "I just knew I wanted to help someone who didn't deserve to be treated poorly. I had no idea I was meeting the woman who would change everything." "And I thought you were just a nice guy in an expensive suit," Danny laughed. "I was just a guy with buildings and money," Quentin said seriously. "You gave me purpose. You showed me how to use what I had to make real change." As they continued their walk, they passed buildings they had transformed together, formerly energy-inefficient structures now showcasing cutting-edge, sustainable technologies. Streets that had once been concrete deserts now featured green spaces designed by their foundation. "We've literally changed the landscape of this city," Danny marveled, "and raised two incredible children who will continue the work," Quentin added. At home, they relieved the babysitter and checked on their sleeping children: Emma, now a thoughtful 12-year-old already passionate about ocean conservation, and 7-year-old Thomas, who collected rocks and dreamed of sustainable mining practices. Later, as they sat on their terrace overlooking the city they had helped reshape, Danny reflected on their journey. "You know what amazes me most," she said, "that something as simple as standing up for a stranger could lead to all of this." "It wasn't simple," Quentin corrected her. "Most people would have looked away. You faced that situation with dignity, and I couldn't ignore that." "We were both at a crossroads that day," Danny realized. "I was questioning whether I should keep fighting for my degree when everything felt so hard." "You were successful but searching for meaning beyond profit. The universe brought us together at exactly the right moment," Quentin agreed. "Though I think I'd have found you eventually, some connections are inevitable." As the lights of the city twinkled below them, many from buildings they had influenced or directly transformed, Danny leaned her head against her husband's shoulder. "20 years from now, where do you see us?" she asked. "Right here," Quentin said without hesitation. "Still together, still working to make the world better, still coming back to that cafe where it all began." "Always back to the beginning," Danny smiled. "The beginning of forever," Quentin agreed, wrapping his arm around her shoulders as they gazed out at the city they had helped reshape, a testament to what could happen when kindness met purpose. When standing up for someone became standing beside them.